Okay, so welcome to the Inside Exhibit Happy Microcast. In each of these short episodes, we're going to answer everyday questions that have come up to us in the event and exhibit world. I'm Rhiannon, and I am joined by Sean Combs. We're the owners of Steelhead Productions, an event and production agency located in Las Vegas. Okay, Sean. Today
Yep.
we're going to talk about strategy-led design, and I have three common questions to ask you, and I'd love for you to provide some feedback.
Sure.
Okay? So the first question, how does an event planner design an exhibit that actually delivers ROI, not just looks great?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a common question. I think, first of all, it's around being really clear on what the returns in every case look like, right?
Mhm.
Return on investment oftentimes just refers to the financial component of whatever it is that you're working on, but the return might not always be financial,
Yeah,
right? There could be specific outcomes that the exhibitor's looking for. And I think it really starts with being really clear and defining what the objectives and outcomes are. We
right,
oftentimes get on these input calls with clients and they want to dive right into what I would say are the tactical requirements of an environment.
right.
So many meeting rooms, so many demos, so many theaters, things like that.
Hmm.
And it's often where we have to kind of pull them back, especially if their tactics are come from a past or from history. It's sort of, this is what we always do at the show,
Mm,
and we want to sort of stop them in just from thinking purely on building upon what you've done in the past, and think about what is the task at hand. What are we trying to do this year? It's
yeah,
likely that there are that things, especially now that at the speed of everything, that there's changes in their business. There's probably changes in their marketplace, changes in their audience. And so we want to really start from really what are the objectives. And it's only from there that you can even possibly measure what those returns are going to be.
okay, so what I heard you say was ideally, if an event planner could come into the design process knowing what they'd like to achieve. So having a
Yeah.
lot of clarity around what does success look like
Hmm.
first, and then creating an environment, not really being attached to an environment, the specifics of an environment until the objectives are very
Right.
really well designed.
And one trick for doing that, most of us in this industry are highly visual, right?
Right.
And so paint the picture. You're there at the end of the show. Take yourself to the end of the event and you're
Yeah.
there. And if there were to be some bottle of champagne that you're about to pop with your coworkers and teammates and celebrate the success of your show because you know you hit those objectives,
Mm,
uh, that's like a little bit of a visual trick for just imagining, some would say manifesting,
yeah.
those
Now
those
you're speaking my
realities coming
language.
true. Yes. Yeah.
Start with the end in mind.
Right, exactly.
Okay, cool. I've heard you say that before. Okay, I have two more questions.
Okay.
Second question. How can an event planner build a consistent brand story across multiple trade shows? And then in multiple trade shows, let's assume then there are different audiences.
Yeah. Well, that right there is a real big one. Um, many brands have offerings into multiple vertical markets,
Hmm.
and the audiences, the attendees at those shows can be vastly different.
Yeah.
And so, for example, when you're designing booth engagements, for example, and you're going to ask the attendee to do something, it's very important to know the demographics of who that attendee is, because based on the demographics, there's a certain willingness or resistance to do or participate into certain things. There also might be scenarios where the audience, maybe they're more influencer and less buyer decision makers. And so
Mhm.
maybe they're on an educational journey. And so
Yeah.
that's going to require you to really design an experience for that end in mind.
Yeah.
Whereas if someone has buyer decision making decisions, you might create other aspects of the environment that are really tooled to engage the attendee on that level. So knowing who is coming in is such a significant component. Now you mentioned consistency. So the look, the feel, the storytelling of the brand, that can be done architecturally, graphically. We can use audio visual storytelling, digital messaging, things like that. But the overall experience is really should be tailored toward the person and what the attendee is to do.
Well, and I know like even tactically, the configuring of your environment might change. Like you might be on an aisle at one show, you might have a peninsula at another, you might be in a 20 by 40 in one and get prime real estate, but it's a 2020 space at a different show. So what about that? What about the more like
Well, you
tact?
also, yeah, and you're getting, everyone likes to look at the floor plan and then draw some direct or indirect line from the entrance right to your booth, as if everybody's coming in and that's how they're going to arrive at your space. That's just not the case. A lot of times look at your surroundings. Where are your competitors on the floor? How do
Yeah,
you want to be in relationship or proximity to them? Then you get into things like a closed or captive booth environment versus one that's maybe more open.
yeah.
There are times and places for both where those two totally different strategies can be really, really quite effective.
Mhm.
We have some clients in some industries where what's on the inside is on a real invite need to know basis. And
Yeah,
so you can create an incredible presence from the outside that actually is sort of gets the buzz on the floor is what's going on in there.
yeah.
So you can use different design tactics to create a different vibe for sure.
Yeah, and I think like even more specifically, like the flexibility that a rental environment provides. You can literally reconfigure your and everything be branded consistently, but reconfigure. And it's one of the benefits of
Yeah.
renting, or like we like to say, like the access model, but definitely the ability to switch up the pieces to best suit the
Yeah.
footprint that you have at any given show is definitely something that should be taken into
So I
consideration.
think I
Wouldn't you
think
say?
most brand marketers understand the difference between brand consistency and then just flattening the brand and making it the same all the time,
Yeah.
right? Most marketers, effective marketers they want the dynamics around their brand that keeps it top of mind and keeps
Mhm.
people thinking what is next without it being sort of inconsistent or what is that they're trying to say or do or worse yet, who is that?
Yeah.
So there's the consistency is one thing, but that doesn't mean that you can't make something completely new, fresh, and exciting time after time.
Yeah,
Think about
definitely.
some of the most dynamic brands that you know of, famous ones like Coca-Cola. Look at the number of campaigns they are running constantly. None
Yeah.
of it dilutes the brand.
Well, and
If anything, it makes,
you
no,
never question if you're in a Coca-Cola environment or like a Pepsi environment. You'll
right.
always know, but
You
you
know
could
where you're
be,
at.
yeah, experiencing
But
something
they
totally
activate
different,
those spaces in a different way each and every time. And in
right?
fact, if they didn't, it would be a real danger to their brand. It
Yeah,
would become flat
disappointment.
and old.
Yeah.
There's far too many challengers now in every space.
Yeah, I love that. It really gives us the opportunity to create exciting
Yeah,
environments and the
absolutely.
challenge around keeping the brand consistent. Okay, last question. Um,
hmm
how can an event planner keep their trade show design fresh year after year?
Um, well, I would say this. Hopefully, there's a desire to keep it fresh,
Let's start
right? So,
there.
there are a lot of brands, and there's constraints within their own business and their own culture, their own politics inside of their companies, and that oftentimes and unfortunately drive their trade show or event activation. I would say in the wrong way, right? I'll give you an example where we lose sight of what objectives are, strategy, and tactics. We want to reuse our graphics from last year
Yeah,
is not an objective, nor is it a strategy. It's a suggestion dealing with one of the realities or the constraints with that they're dealing with, which is budget,
yeah,
right? Because I would think that if that constraint didn't exist, they'd think, okay, let's reimagine the space.
Yeah.
So we get that a lot. And what we would rather do is engage people on understanding what the constraints are, and they're real. Budget's a real thing.
Yeah.
And so if one of the objectives is to show up fresh to this event, different in a different yet consistent way than we were last year. However, we can't spend any more money than we did last year. Then one of the strategies might end up being let's reuse some of the graphics.
Uh-huh.
Hanging sign, for example, it's wayfinding. It's like we don't need to reinvent the hanging sign, but at the experience level, we might want to. So these are the trade-offs that we have to
Right.
make. But
Yeah.
again, it starts, and I understand a lot of event managers they're so focused on some of the constraints that and it's great that they're offering the suggestions, but I think the mistake that we would make as designers and creators would be to take the suggestion as the objective,
Yeah,
and
smart.
that happens often,
Hmm.
because there might be a way to mitigate the cost issue.
Yeah.
And who knows? I mean, if you're
Yeah.
working with an existing provider, they might help you out. I don't really know. There's a myriad of ways that you might be able to address that particular constraint.
Hmm.
But the goal should be for most dynamic brand marketers is to create a new experience each and every time.
Right.
These brands go to the shows on a cycle year after year, and the last thing that we want to do is have them show up in the same way that they've always showed up. Then the attendees like just well, I've seen that before. I'm
Yeah.
moving on.
Yeah,
And you think,
absolutely.
and yet part of what I've seen that before, where that comes from is you used your graphics last year.
Hmm.
So you didn't, so what have we really accomplished there? And so
Right.
being very articulate about the differences of the objective, what is the strategy to meet that goal, right?
Hmm.
What are the tactics that we're going to use? What's the investment? What are the resources available for
Yeah.
us to execute? And you mentioned another thing, which is all the shows are different. Not every show it has the importance to each and every brand, and therefore the companies might resource them differently.
Right.
And so we see that all the time.
Well, and I think it just takes it back to the top. Start with the end in mind. What does success
Yeah,
look like at
yeah,
that particular show, this particular year?
yeah.
And budget management might be a really important part of the goals for the year. So definitely like to keep that in mind.
Money is always an issue, and I'm leery of any of any client we engage with that says, "Oh, money's not an issue." I've just always found money to be an issue.
Yeah.
It's just, but it's my
Something to
favorite,
consider, something to consider.
right? But it's my favorite Warren Buffett quote, right? Which is, price is what you pay, value is what you get.
Yeah.
So the key is like, what are those value points? What are we trying to hit? Where can we get the most out of the resources that you have?
Yeah.
What are the design decisions that we can make? Because design drives all of these other things.
Absolutely.
So,
Yeah. Okay, well, good sesh. For everybody that tuned in, thank you for joining. If our conversation today, sparked any new ideas or you have any questions, we'd love to hear. So please just drop some comments. Or if you're looking to have a more intentional conversation, don't hesitate hitting us up at www.exhibithappy.com. So until next time, stay creative, stay curious, and keep exhibiting happy.